Hello, I am Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In today's class, I will discuss some answers on paper 2. Now, normally, what I do is I have some model answers and we discuss how those answers are good answers, how they will score well. Today, I'm taking a slightly different approach and I have with me some answers which are written by a student who joined me recently. And when I asked her to attempt the paper so that I could see her answer writing, this is what she submitted. I always ask my students in classes to first answer some paper or give me papers which they've already answered so that I can know what their writing style is at present, and then I can help them from there onwards to improve themselves. When I do this exercise, I get to see a lot of common mistakes that students make. So in this class, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to present to you typical answers that students write and how those answers result in them losing marks. Okay, there are some good answers also on this paper, but largely the answers are average or below average. So this is like learning from mistakes. You can learn from your own mistakes and you can learn from others' mistakes. It's good to look at model answers, but sometimes looking at mistakes can be even more helpful because then you learn how to avoid those. Okay, so let's see, we'll learn in the process how to write the correct answers also. Beginning with the first question. From the study by Andre, describe two ways that variables were controlled or the procedure was standardized. Okay, now clearly they have mentioned we have to give two ways. And there are two slots to answer, as we always know. So here the student writes that all participants heard the same 2.5 minute tape, which is a good example. And she also says that they were given standardized instructions before listening to the tape. Now, what are the mistakes in this answer? Firstly, when they say controlled or how the procedure was standardized. Though not compulsory, it is always good to specify what we are talking about. It's like they've given a choice. Either give variables that were controlled or give examples of standardization. Which have we selected? What choice have we made? We should be clear on that. So we can say one way the procedure was standardized was that all participants had to hear the tape. So the point is correct. She doesn't lose any credit for it. It's just for clarification. Second point which she makes is right, that they are given the same standardized instructions, but what are those instructions is what she has not specified. So here definitely I will deduct 1 mark. In fact, if you see in this study, there are two different groups. In each group, there are standardized instructions. So in fact, this point becomes a little wrong. The doodling group which is there, that group is instructed to doodle as well. That is to shade into the shapes which are given. And the other group, the control group, is not given instructions to doodle. Now, if I make a sweeping statement like all participants were given standardized instruction, that's true. But then groups were given standardized instructions differently also. So then I need to give some at least example of, okay, this group was given this standardized instruction. So for example, the doodling group, or all participants in the doodling group were given the standardized instruction to shade into the shapes given on the monitoring sheet. Okay. Now see, I have always maintained that standpoint that you need not go for a fixed length or you need not fill out all the lines which are given on the paper. But just think about it. When you're writing, there are so many lines given, and your answer is getting completed in one or just barely touching the second line. Don't you feel when you're writing at that time that there must be something more to it? Some more elaboration must be required. Don't aim for any length, but be conscious, be mindful of what is given on the paper. Take note of that and try to get a hint from there or from the marks that you need to speak a little more. They've allotted 4 marks for it. How will you be credited 4 marks if you're going to give something as general as standardized instruction and not elaborate on it further? Okay, so think carefully and write your answers. Let's look at the next question. From the study by Perry et al., outline what is meant by placebo, including the example from this study. Here the student writes placebo is a trial group. Placebo, as we know, is a substance. It is not a trial group. And what is a trial group? There's nothing like a trial group. So this is wrong to begin with. Which has no active effects. It is a substance which has no active effect. Not a trial group. In fact, even active effect is not very clear, but I'll say it's acceptable. It should be something like no active effect like the drug, or no medicinal property, or no drug-like effect. Means it should be very clear which effect it does not have. Now from Perry et al., she gives the example that they used saline solution in the placebo group instead of oxytocin. This is right, the example is correct. And she also says oxytocin was used in the experimental group. Again, the example could be made more clear by saying that it was intranasally administered. Still, it's not important. So the example is credit worthy. The definition is not, because the meaning has changed. Here she has confused placebo with the control group itself, which is administered placebo. So this answer will get 1. In research methods paper, though the easiest part should be when they ask you direct questions about any research method or any methodological concept, because even if you're the memorizing type of students, that textbook chapter which is on research methods, you should just memorize what are demand characteristics, what is placebo, what is control group. Still, somehow this is the very part where students lose most of their marks. Like in this answer, this was the perfect example. It shows base concepts are not clear. The student has a rough idea of what is placebo, or from what they've learned in Perry et al., that placebo group was the saline group. They're trying to make a general statement on what is placebo, but they've not really understood the concept under research methodological concepts. So make sure you know your research methods concepts well and you're able to define them with full clarity. Let's look at the next question. From the study by Pilyavin et al., describe how quantitative data was collected in the study. Without reading this answer only, just looking at the length of it, like just taking an overview, I know something is lacking. So this is how the examiner looks at the answer. Okay, the observer noted how many people helped and time it took to help. Okay, how many people helped is correct, but better language would be to say frequency of offering help, and time it took for them to help. The better terminology would be duration of helping. Okay, psychological terminology, I've discussed this in many other videos also, is very important. Though they credit it only in the essays, they give a separate criterion of terminology, does not mean in rest of the answers you don't need to use terminology. It is very important. So the observer, first of all, it was observers. They noted how many people helped and duration of helping. This is right. The question is how. Here data collection is given. What was the quantitative data is given. So the what question has been answered. But where is the how? How did they record these things? So we know that in the Pilyavin study, they were secretly making notes and they had timers with them on which they secretly used to record from the first time the person went to offer help. From the first time the victim collapsed till the first person got up to offer help. That is the how part of it, the timer, the notes, from when to when they were timing. This is just an answer to which or what is the quantitative data. So the question has not been read carefully over here. That's why it scores only 1 mark. Next is suggest one strength of collecting quantitative data in this study. It helps in comparison between the ill condition and drunk condition, therefore the study is more objective. This is incorrect. Two different strengths of quantitative data have been confused. Only one strength should have been taken, and it should have been supported with the Pilyavin study. First of all, because they have given the Pilyavin study in the stimulus, it is expected that some reference be made to that study. Contextualization should be done. So giving a general answer like, okay, comparison is there, objectivity is there, then why have they named the study? If they wanted to give general answer, then they would have just asked you what are two strengths of quantitative data. Now that's one. Secondly, these both points are not the same. Like, it's not one is the explanation of the other. One strength of quantitative data is it enables direct comparisons. Okay, now no doubt she has mentioned ill condition and drunk condition. But what is being compared in the ill and drunk condition? They're not comparing the conditions with each other. That's the manipulation that they are doing. The frequency of offering help. In drunk and ill conditions, that could be compared directly because it was quantitative data. Okay, that is one point we could give, or we could give the point that interpretation of data is more objective. What is more objective? The helping behavior of the passengers. So how much passengers were helping, that was objectively interpreted by the researchers. Either one of these points can be given, and ideally it should be mentioned no matter which of these points is given, that it increases validity of the findings. Next is explain what is measured by standard deviation. Okay, how dispersed the data is in relation to the mean is standard deviation. This is correct. Spread, variability or dispersion is what is measured by standard deviation. This is a separate question altogether. It is not linked with the Pilyavin scenario, so this is correct. Next is in the study by Pozzolo et al., the experimenters wore professional casual clothing. Name one example of professional casual clothing worn by experimenters in this study. Now something is very off about this answer. I don't know what the student has read and what she's answered. It seems she's been in a different mind while answering this question. One example of the clothing they have worn was, as we saw, they wore casual t-shirts and trousers. So any one we can give. Explain why wearing professional casual clothing was necessary. Because here she says that it's a control to standardize the experiment, as the difference in attire can make changes in the way participants react. Firstly, when the study is Pozzolo and we know it's about children, why not think from a child point of view and why not say children instead of participants? That's one. Secondly, if we would think from the point of view of children, then we would be able to come to the point that children would get intimidated by overtly formal or overtly professional clothing. So that's why also it's important to think about it, not just because we have to be perfect in the terminology we are using. It makes more sense to us if we think in these terms, that okay, Pozzolo study children, how would children be impacted by clothing? So here when she says that it can make changes, again it's very vague. What changes is she referring to? Like, are people giving wrong answers because of the clothing of the experimenter? Are they giving better answers because of the clothing of the experimenter? What is change? Change is a very ambiguous term over here. So the clear answer would be that children could become intimidated by overtly professional clothing, which would make it difficult for them to identify the faces in the lineup task. That is how it should be written. So this is very general. It seems more like the student is guessing, does not really know why it was done. That's why it scores a 0. Here I want you to see, there's nothing to feel bad about this. You might be one of the students who is writing answers like this, like the one you're seeing here. So more or less you might be writing similar answers, because I have come across lots of students writing generic answers, and then they come and tell me, how come I got a D? How come I got ungraded answers? What happens is they do their full AS with a lot of overconfidence. Then they come to me for A levels because they find that the portion is tough, and by the time that their results are released for AS, then they realize, oh, they have done very badly in that, whereas they were expecting very high grades. Now can you see, it's not about just writing anything, it's not about writing 2 or 3 words from the study, it's writing the correct things from the study, relevant things. This is how you lose marks in the paper. That's why I told you can learn better even from mistakes more than model answers, because this might be reflective of what you are doing in the paper. And this is not to criticize you or the student who's written these answers. This is to show you and to make you aware where you lose marks, and indeed you can score very low in psychology. Don't underestimate the subject. Just because it looks like it's easy to understand from the textbook, understanding does not translate into answers. In fact, many of the times understanding is at a very superficial level. That's what you realize when you see the question and you don't know how to answer. The next question is, describe 2 ways the dependent variables can be measured using any examples. This is a 6 marker. Here the student begins with a definition of the dependent variable. It will not get any credit. They have not asked for a definition, so we could straight off begin with how it is measured. This is a little unnecessary, but it's nothing to bring down the marks also. Now first she mentions self-report. That is correct. Self-report is one way of measuring the dependent variable. She also gives the example of questionnaire, interview. Good. All these are correct. Now next what she says is, according to the aim, the needful data can be asked through question. This is also correct. Then she gives the example of Baron-Cohen study. They use the scores by participants in the ICE test to identify social sensitivity, and they use the autism question scores to test the intensity of autism the participant has. This is good. She has identified the correct way of measurement, and she has given a relevant example from Baron-Cohen study. So here definitely she'll get 3 marks. We saw total marks given for this answer are 6. 2 ways have been asked. One way would be for 3 marks. Logically they divided into half and half of the marks. So for one way she's given it correctly. Now let's look to the next way. She says in addition to observation could also be used. And she gives the example of Hassett et al. Study where the monkey's interactions with toys were observed to come to a conclusion. This example is a little weaker. Again, the example is relevant. She's identified the method also correctly, observation. But one thing is, in self-report, when she has elaborated more, like they can ask questions. Why in observation she has not elaborated more? Why has she not said that they can study or they can watch and record the behaviors? It's again about being mindful. It's like you know how to write the answer. For one of the ways you have written correctly, you have followed a pattern. You gave a point, you named the method, you elaborated. In the second, in your own answer, you have not been able to maintain consistency. You could have just followed the same pattern which you used for the first method in the second, and you would get full marks. Okay, so write with full attention. Don't be distracted. Don't be worried. You're following a pattern like name, self-report, elaboration, asking questions, example, Baron-Cohen. Follow the same thing in the second one. Name, observation, elaboration, watching and recording the behavior, and then example. Now I also said the example is weak, like Hassett et al. Example is weak in the sense she has not elaborated on it fully. So what she could have elaborated on was, just like she said what was measured in the Baron-Cohen study, the performance on the ICE test. Like that, here also she could have mentioned exactly what was measured. So it was more than interaction with the toys, it was preference for wheeled or plush toys. That she could have given. or she could have given some of the examples of the behaviors that were observed in that study. Has it at all, like dragging the toys, sitting on the toy, extended touching of the toy, something like that. So it would have been more specific and detailed. So because elaboration is missing and the example is not complete, she would score 4 over here. Okay, there was scope for getting 6 because she knew how to write the answer. So here you can see how slight mistakes can bring down the marks. Okay, today I'm going to stop this video here. We have seen how course study questions can be answered in paper 2 and what are the common mistakes made. In the same way, in the next class we will discuss how unseen scenarios can be answered and what type of mistakes students tend to make over them. Okay, so today I'm ending the class here. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.